Fire on Meeting Street, Pain, Purpose, and the Meanings of Denmark Vesey's Rebellion, 1822, Charleston. Storyteller's voice, historian's spine. What follows treats the Vesey conspiracy not as a rumor in the margins, but as a declaration, planned in sermons and back rooms, sharpened in workshops and whispered through kin networks, of human dignity and freedom. The ground of sorrow. Charleston in 1822 was a paradox built of brick and bondage. Along the Battery, wealth glittered. Rice and cotton fortunes, counting houses, ships knotting the Atlantic to Africa and the Caribbean. In the lanes behind, enslaved men and women raised those houses, cooked those dinners, nursed those children, rowed those boats, hauled those bales. Their lives were scheduled by someone else's profit and bordered by law, passes for movement, curfews at night, patrols on horseback, whips that wrote policy on flesh. Even the free black minority lived inside a pen of suspicion, taxed and watched and told that freedom was a permission that could be withdrawn. From this landscape emerged Denmark Vesey, born enslaved, carried by a slaver across the islands and into Charleston, where he later won a lottery and used the proceeds to purchase his freedom. He could not buy his wife and children. He turned to carpentry, built a business, and co-founded an independent African Methodist Episcopal congregation where the Bible sounded like a ledger of promises. Exodus, Jubilee, a Lord who remembered the enslaved by name. City officials understood what hope could do. They raided that church, flogged worshipers, and shuttered meetings. But faith does not close when doors do. It migrates to backyards and kitchens, to class meetings and night markets, to the spaces where law cannot fit. Pain preceded the plot. It lived in families divided by law, in sermons interrupted by arrests, in the knowledge that a man could be free and his son still be property. This is the first truth. No decent order can ask a people to bear that forever. 2. Why rise? Grievance, faith, and necessity. Grievance. Structural, not episodic. This was not revenge for one lash but refusal of a system. The slave code patrolled movement and meeting. Black churches were harassed and closed. Literacy drew suspicion, and at sunset, freedom itself could become contraband. The city's majority black demography and its ceaseless maritime traffic made white officials anxious. That anxiety legislated. Faith. Exodus as a map. Vesey read scripture as instruction. He preached deliverance against Pharaoh, a God who hears groans and acts. In that theology, revolt was not disorder. It was obedience to a higher law. The AME congregation, later known as Mother Emanuel, became a school of courage, a place to translate grievance into grammar. Necessity, geography, and timing. Charleston's Meeting Street arsenal, guardhouses, and harbor offered levers. Seize arms, strike fast, open a path to the docks, and sail for Haiti, the Black Republic whose revolution had already redrawn the Atlantic's imagination. Speed and secrecy were the currency. Ships were the exit strategy. That was the plan's austere elegance. 3. Forging a conspiracy. Carpenters, class leaders, and kin. A rebellion is built from ordinary things. Carpenters' shops where men measured twice and spoke once. Class meetings where the Psalms braided memory to resolve. Markets and wharves where news from Saint-Domingue and Philadelphia arrived folded inside gossip. Vesey and lieutenants, Peter Poyas, Monday Gell, Gullah Jack, and others, organized by family ties and work gangs, testing the trustworthy with small risks before entrusting them with larger ones. The intended date circled was mid-June 1822, then whispered forward, July 14th, Bastille Day. In the telling of later accounts, a symbolic bridge to another revolution. The method: concentrated strikes, arson as distraction, arsenal first, harbor next. The aim: break the city's reflexes before morning. Recruitment spread in concentric rings: urban craftsmen, draymen, boatmen, plantation hands with cousins in town. Women kept the lines humming, bread hidden under cloth, words passed at wells, signals layered into errands. The movement had no formal minutes, only memory and momentum. 4. Interruption, betrayal, arrest, and a city on edge. The plot's enemy was not only the state, it was time. Secrecy costs. One more ally means one more possible informer. In late May 1822, an enslaved man carried the plan to his enslaver. Officials formed a secret court, arrested Vesey and scores of others, and questioned men under threat and promise. Trials began behind closed doors, without juries, and convictions came fast. Out of 131 men charged, 67 were convicted. 35 were hanged, including Vesey. The rest were transported or otherwise punished. The African church was razed, its leaders jailed or exiled. The city staged its sovereignty in a spectacle of ropes, ruins, and proclamations. We have the official story because the mayor, James Hamilton Jr., published it. A 40-odd-page account that became the received version. Catastrophe barely averted, vigilance vindicated. Blame assigned to Black Christianity and literacy. Even in 1822, not everyone agreed. Governor Thomas Bennett Jr. criticized the secret procedures and worried that executions based on unconfronted testimony stained the state's law. Later historians have argued over the scope and certainty of the plot. Some see exaggeration by officials, others a genuine mass conspiracy compressed by fear into a smaller archive. Mature reading holds both tensions: a state with motives to magnify, and a Black community with motives and courage to resist. 5. Stories within the story. The carpenter's bench. A man smooths a plank in a shed behind a townhouse. He has learned to measure weight and balance, to make load-bearing joints invisible from the street. Organizing feels similar. Pressure where wood will take it. Quiet where wood will split. The class meeting. A woman whispers the Exodus into a neighbor's ear, breaking bread that was supposed to be for morning. Let my people go is not metaphor to her. It is calendar. The informer. He has reasons. Fear, a promise of leniency, the need to keep his mother safe. After he speaks, white men call him loyal, and he no longer sleeps like he used to. The dock. A boatman watches sloops rock in the tide and imagines a night with no return ticket. In his mind's eye, Charleston fades behind, and Cap Haiti-inspired rises ahead like an answered prayer. The courtroom. A judge who owns people presides over people accused of claiming their own. The record keeps names, not kinships. Verdicts, not songs. These vignettes are not footnotes. They are the revolution at human scale. 6. The price paid. Trade-offs and losses borne by Black Charlestonians. Lives. Ropes took men, transport scattered others, and fear made people speak or fall silent in ways that cost them neighbors for years. There is no arithmetic that can make those numbers gentle. Church. The African church, Mother Emanuel's ancestor, was burned and dissolved. Its ministers were jailed or driven out. Morris Brown fled north. A sanctuary had been a school of selfhood. Its destruction was meant to retake a vocabulary. Law. The state responded with statutes that narrowed an already narrow life. Restrictions on Black religious assembly hardened. The Negro Seaman Act, 1822, jailed free black sailors from foreign and domestic ports while their ships lay in harbor, to quarantine ideas and information. In some versions of the law, sailors could be sold if captains refused fees. Post-Vesey, Charleston also fortified itself, eventually raising a state arsenal, the Citadel, so that vigilance had an address. Economy of fear. Patrols thickened, passes were demanded more aggressively, hiring out arrangements tightened. In markets and alleys, black Charlestonians learned to weigh each errand against a new scale of risk. These are the trade-offs of survival in a white supremacist order. Every attempt to claim personhood met by new machinery to deny it. 7. What black people took back anyway. Name, witness, and horizon. Agency and public. Whatever the debate over documents, the state's panic proved the enslaved and free black community had political capacity to plan, to network, to frighten an order that claimed to be natural. You do not build guardhouses and secret courts to answer noise. You build them to answer agency. Witness that traveled. News of Vesey moved north and into abolitionist arguments. Slavery was not merely immoral. It was unstable because the people it caged would not consent. Writers and orators made Vesey a symbol of Old Testament resolve against Pharaoh. Detractors painted him as fanatic to evacuate the politics from his purpose. Both readings multiplied his reach. A widened horizon. In the Black South, Memory of Charleston 1822 joined a repertoire that ran from slowdowns and sabotage to clandestine schooling and armed flight. Not everyone chose the same tactic. Almost everyone carried the same verdict. A human life is not a unit of property. 8. The views that met the rising. Officials, neighbors, and the public script. Officials. Mayor Hamilton's pamphlet presented a city saved by vigilance and blamed black worship and literacy for daring to think. Governor Bennett, worried about law's reputation and rights even as he profited from slavery, criticized secrecy and procedure. State lawmakers chose order over reform, tightening the net, arming the city, and jailing sailors whose only offense was being free and black near a harbor. The official gaze was pragmatic. Concede nothing essential. Expand surveillance. Punish swiftly. Neighbors. Many white Charlestonians read the moment as proof that black freedom was a contagion. Among black neighbors, the spectrum ran from courage to caution. Some joined, some refused. Many helped in ways the archive does not capture. Women's logistics and discretion kept families intact after the rope fell. Public script. With newspapers largely silenced while the court sat, the city wrote its own record, one that served its needs. Later historians have reopened the file, contrasting court confessions with transcript fragments, and asking what truth means when extracted under threat. The answer is not to abandon the record, but to read it against itself, alongside memory, context, and consequence. The truth behind the uprisings. Vesey's conspiracy was not chaos. It was conscience organized, born of structural cruelty, framed in a theology of liberation, and executed as far as time and betrayal allowed. The killing of innocents would have been part of any urban insurrection. To say so is not to excuse, but to tell the whole truth. The same way we must name the daily violences of a peace that sold children, flogged preachers, and jailed sailors for their skin. Mature history refuses to tidy either reality away. Lessons written in fire and ash. Freedom is a practice before it is a statute. The conspiracy acted as if dignity were already law and asked the city to catch up. Church is infrastructure. The state knew exactly how dangerous black worship could be when it taught people to read themselves as Exodus. Information is oxygen. The Negro Seaman Act tried to suffocate contact across water because ideas cross faster than patrols ride. Law has a budget. Secret courts and compensation schedules prove that justice in a slave society is also a ledger. Memory outlives architecture. Burn a church and its congregation will meet in kitchens. Hang a leader and his name will preach after he is gone. Sepul Coda, Meeting Street at midnight. Imagine the city asleep and a handful of men awake, listening for the hour. They are carpenters and boatmen, class leaders and cooks, people who have learned to keep one eye on the patrol and the other on the horizon. In their pockets, a nail, a scrap of verse, a plan. In their mouths, Exodus. In their reach, a harbor that points to a republic where blackness is a nation, not a crime. The state will name them criminals. History remembers something more difficult and more beautiful, a people insisting, at the cost of rope and ruin, on being the authors of their own future. This was not only an intended insurrection, it was a proposition about the human, and even when a city said no, the proposition remained true. 32. Carpentry of Freedom. Extended chapters on Denmark Vesey's conspiracy, 1822. The city that learned to listen for footsteps. Anatomy of Charleston's security state. Before 1822, Charleston already lived by the clink of keys and the rhythm of patrol hooves. After the arrests, security became a civic religion. Patrol routes thickened like scar tissue. Lantern checks became ritual. Pass papers turned into a second skin without which you could not move through the city's arteries. The city guard, part police, part militia, part stage cast, performed sovereignty in nightly scenes, halting a rowboat mid-tide, peering into a prayer circle, riffling through a carpenter's shavings for a hidden blade. In that theater of vigilance, the secret tribunal was the backstage where the script was rewritten. No juries, limited counsel, witnesses whose words arrived pressed between fear and favor. The proceedings had less to do with discovering fact than with restoring a threatened hierarchy. The state did not merely punish, it sought to control the narrative, to shrink a collective bid for freedom into the pathology of a few men. That is how an order under strain convinces itself it is stable. Security also took architectural form. The arsenal that later evolved into the State Military Academy gave vigilance an address and a silhouette on the skyline. The message was simple and blunt. We will not be surprised again. But buildings can also stand as confessions. This city felt the ground move beneath it and poured brick against its fear. 13. The law of the harbor. Jailing sailors to jail ideas. You can learn a lot about a city from how it treats its visitors. Free black sailors were the 19th century's Wi-Fi, fast carriers of news, songs, rumors, and strategies along the Atlantic Rim. Charleston responded with a maritime quarantine, not of disease, but of dignity. Free seamen were jailed when their ships docked, detained until departure, and threatened with fines, sale, or worse if captains balked at the fees. Officials said this was safety. It was intellectual embargo. Sailors brought stories from Saint-Domingue, from northern black churches, from docks where free men owned their own names. The city understood something crucial. Information is oxygen. If you breathe it long enough, your back straightens. If a harbor is a lung, the statute was a hand over the mouth. The seamen's jail became a strange classroom. Men who had slept under stars found themselves under lock, reciting to one another maps of memory so they would not forget who they were. When the cell doors opened at sail time, they carried those maps back into the world. 14. Haiti as North Star. Fear, rumor, and a black republic in the mind. For enslaved and free black Charlestonians, Haiti was not just a place, it was a horizon. News of a black republic that had defeated France did the work of 1,000 sermons. It meant that the sentence, "People like us cannot rule," had already been proven false. In rumor and plan alike, Haiti functioned as exit strategy and thought experiment. What if our bodies and our laws answered to us? To the city's rulers, Haiti was a cautionary tale grown teeth. Whispered connections, real or imagined, between Vesey's circle and Caribbean ports traveled through the docks. Even the possibility that slaves might sail toward sovereignty disturbed sleep. You cannot police an ocean with a lantern. You police it with fear. That is why the harbor's bars were tightened, not to stop boats, but to stop belief. 15. Church as infrastructure. Mother Emanuel before it had that name. The African Methodist congregation flourished because it answered needs the city refused to see. It was worship, yes, but also school, union hall, credit circle, and postal service for those who could not trust the mail. Parables doubled as parables and plans. Prayer requests were also supply lists. A hymn could carry a second meaning under its melody. Officials saw correctly that the church organized a counter-public. When they raided and shuttered it, they tried to sever the arteries that carried courage. But faith migrates. Kitchens became sanctuaries. Alleys replaced aisles. Class leaders walked their circuits like messengers on a besieged wall. Burn a building and you discover whether you have extinguished a fire or merely scattered embers. 16. The gendered labor of risk. Women who made resistance possible. When history takes attendance, it too often calls only the names in the dock. Look instead at the stove, the well, the market table, the wash kettle. Women fed the movement. Bread risen at midnight, salted meat hidden under cloths. Water carried farther than any trial transcript admits. They braided news into errands, tucked warnings into recipes, and knew which knock meant patrol and which meant friend. They were also logisticians of aftermath. After the hangings, it was women who gathered scattered kin, who traded with dangerous men to retrieve a father's coat, who calculated how much grief could be voiced without drawing the wrong ears. If the conspiracy was carpentry, they sanded the edges so families would not cut themselves every time they touched memory. 17. The Waterfront Network. Pilots, caulkers, stevedores, and tide-borne intelligence. Charleston's docks were a language. Pilots who knew the bars and shoals also knew which captains talked too much, which mates carried abolition papers in their coat lining. Caulkers moved along hull seams and heard conversations that thought the sea covered them. Stevedores calculated weights and overheard plans. Wherever there is work that must be done with many hands, there is information that cannot help but flow. Vesey's circle swam in this current carefully. Every added ear brought reach and risk. It takes uncommon judgment to grow a movement without growing its noise. That so much remained secret until late May tells you the caliber of the carpentry. 18. The arithmetic of informers, mercy, money, and the afterlives of betrayal. A city under threat creates markets of conscience. Testimony is bought with promises, with threats, with whispered mercy for an ailing mother. Some men informed because terror broke them. Some because they believed they were saving their household. Some because power's smile is easier to face than its fist. After the ropes were coiled, the informers' lives did not return to normal. White gratitude is a surveillance that never sleeps. Black neighbors' silence can be a sentence too. A hard truth. In movements born inside cages, the line between survival and betrayal wobbles. That is why the archive reads like a confusion of motives. We should refuse cheap judgments here. People made choices with the tools they had and the shadows they stood in. The lesson is not that trust is impossible, but that trust is costly and must be budgeted like bread. 19. Timelines that ripple. Law, brick, and the long echo of 1822. In the immediate wake came arrests, executions, and banishment. Then came ordinances on assembly, worship, passes, wages, and the terms of hiring out. The city soon fortified itself with permanent military infrastructure. In the following decades, the arsenal was formalized as a military academy, a standing reminder that the governing class meant to live with its finger always on the bolt. But repression carries a paradox. The more an order must perform its invulnerability, the more it confesses vulnerability. Every additional lantern, every new rule about who may pray, every guardhouse built where a school might have stood, these are monuments to fear. 22. Historiography. Who gets to decide what happened? For 2 centuries, the Vesey conspiracy has been a contested text. The city's official narrative was quick to press and generous to itself. Later scholars opened the file and asked hard questions. How large was the network? Which confessions were shaped more by the interrogator than the accused? Did officials magnify a plot to justify a crackdown, or minimize it to contain its politics? Answers diverge, and a responsible historian lives in that tension. 2 things can be true at once. States have reasons to bend memory, and Black communities had reason and courage to resist. When a record is produced by frightened power, you read it against itself, for seams, for repetitions, for the facts that leak through the choices of what to record. You also listen for echoes beyond paper, the speed of the repression, the breadth of the legal response, the diaspora of a congregation, the building of fortresses. Consequence, too, is evidence. 21. A comparative cartography. Gabriel, 1800. Vesey, 1822. Turner, 1831. German coast, 1811. Place the conspiracies side by side and patterns appear. Gabriel, Richmond, 1800. Urban strike on the seat of government. Seize armory. Hold the governor as hostage. Bargain for emancipation. Strength, clarity. Weakness, weather and betrayals. German coast, Louisiana, 1811. A march of plantation hands toward New Orleans. Numbers as spectacle. A bid to outpace the militia with momentum. Strength, mass. Weakness, open terrain. Vesey, Charleston, 1822. Dense urban network. Arsenal first. Arson as diversion. harbor as escape to a black republic. Strength, secrecy and exit plan. Weakness, informers, city surveillance refined by fear of Haiti. Turner, Southampton, 1831. Theological imperative, shock tactics, rural geography, speed over siege. Strength, moral voltage, suddenness. Weakness, isolation, swift militia coordination. The lesson of the map is not failure, it is iteration. Each attempt learned from the other's choices and constraints. Each forced governments to adjust, and each left behind skills, how to network, how to signal, how to endure interrogation, that did not disappear when the ropes did. 22. The long thread, from 1822 to the present tense. The story of Vesey's church did not end in ashes. The congregation regathered as scattered seeds often do, regrowing roots wherever they could. In the long American century that followed, that tradition of black worship would again and again be treated by power as an enemy, when it simply insisted on being a nation within a nation, a people teaching themselves how to be whole. The sorrow is that the sanctuary remained a target. Plaques are mounted, then stolen, then mounted again. Textbooks forget, then remember. What endures is the vernacular archive of families, stories told at kitchens, in pews, at reunions. A city can bulldoze a building, it cannot bulldoze the way a grandmother says a name. 3T. 5 portraits, composite vignettes. 1. Monday Gell, the runner. He can cross the city with a tool bag and a message, and look like a man going to fix a hinge. He maps patrol routes by listening to jokes the guards tell about themselves. He invents detours the way a drummer invents syncopation, by hearing everything the ear doesn't catch at first. 2. Gullah Jack, the keeper of small secrets. He carries a pouch no one may touch. People call him Conjure Man with equal parts mockery and respect. He is not a magician. He is a confidence artist in the best sense. He builds confidence in people, makes them believe they are braver than yesterday. Sometimes that is stronger than any blade. 3. A woman called Sister Ruth by everyone but the law. She keeps records in her head. Who is hungry? Who is sick? Who needs shoes? Who has a husband on a sloop due Tuesday? She can bake for 20 on a ration for 5, because she knows which neighbor will pretend not to see. Her ledger is written in favors and returned favors. 4. The sailor with a scar under his left eye. He has seen Cap Haitien and knows how a flag looks when it belongs to you. Locked in the harbor jail, he draws maps on the wall with his fingertip, coastlines of memory, and recites them at dawn so he will not forget who he is. 5. The informer no one wants to name. After he speaks, the city becomes his benefactor and his prison. He walks freely and is never free again. His sleep is full of doors he cannot open, and rooms where his mother will not look at him. These are not great men in marble. They are the joints of the structure, the places where weight travels. 24. Double accounting, a moral ledger that refuses to cancel itself. A mature telling refuses 2 temptations: to sanctify armed revolt without reckoning its innocent dead, and to condemn it without reckoning the daily murder of dignity slavery performed under color of law. The Charleston conspiracy likely would have killed civilians. We must say so plainly. But the peace the city preserved by ropes and jail cells was a peace built on kidnapping and sale. There is no arithmetic that cancels one column with the other. There is only the hard truth that freedom in a slave society has a price no one gets to pay in coin. 11 lessons written for the long road. 1. Freedom is audible. You can hear it in the kinds of questions people begin to ask when they no longer fear the answers. 2. Configuration is ideology made wood and brick. Guardhouses and arsenals teach a city what it believes about its neighbors. 3. Literacy threatens tyranny because it multiplies witnesses. A reading people is a remembering people. 4. Secrecy must not starve solidarity. Movements die when caution becomes isolation. 5. Women's labor is the battery. If you do not include their logistics at the table, your plan is already running on low power. 6. Law in an unjust order is choreography. Learn the steps, then decide which ones to refuse. 7. Rumor is a currency. Spend it carefully. Counterfeit travels faster than coin. 8. Every crackdown is a syllabus. The rules they pass teach you what they fear. Study accordingly. 9. Symbols need supply lines. Exodus without bread is rhetoric. Exodus with bread is a march. 10. Memory is maintenance. Tell the story regularly, or it will rust. 11. Dignity is non-negotiable. Everything else is tactics.